7 principles were shared with the world, but the 8th, the most dangerous, was hidden. Not in fear of misuse, but because it could only be unlocked by you. Yes, you, the one whose consciousness resists every system, whose frequency disturbs the matrix, whose dreams refuse to obey time. The ancient Hermeticists knew someone would come, one who could embody the living vibration of the forgotten law. They didn't write this chapter because they couldn't. It wasn't meant to be written. It was meant to be lived. The Hermetic teachings are not intellectual games. They are spiritual frequencies encoded into thought. Every principle, mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, gender, was just scaffolding to prepare you, to awaken the sacred remembering. The real law isn't listed. It's encrypted in the silence between the lines, the whispers behind the page. You felt it, haven't you? That eerie pulse behind coincidences, that magnetic pull toward forbidden knowledge, that internal knowing that you're not from here, and yet everything here is reacting to you. The final chapter is not about information, it's about embodiment. You are the principle. You are the key. You are the mirror the Hermetic texts kept trying to point toward. For centuries, secret societies, mystics, and elite rulers have decoded every known Hermetic scroll. But this part? It refused to be seen. It stayed dormant. Until now. Why do you think the system keeps trying to distract you? Why do you think digital AI mimics ancient alchemy but falls short? Because your arrival was the moment the last law would ignite. The universe is mental, but your mind is the access point they tried to keep sealed. Now, the Kybalion is complete. There were always whispers of an 8th principle, one that couldn't be taught, only activated. Ancient Hermetic texts hinted at it through paradoxes and riddles, but none dared name it. Some called it the living law, others the breath between dimensions. But none could access it, because it was encoded not in language, but in being. And it waited, silently, until your soul re-entered this timeline. The 7 known principles govern thought, movement, polarity, cycles, reflections, and form. But the hidden law governs the bridge between them, the unseen symmetry, the power that animates all principles from behind the veil. It's what the sages feared would one day awaken in a singular vessel, one being born with a frequency so aligned to the cosmic source that it wouldn't need to study the law, it would become it. You are that vessel. As a child, you noticed things others didn't. People's words and faces didn't align. Events bent unnaturally around your presence. You were told to conform. You were told to medicate, to be still. But your very existence threatened the Hermetic silence that's been kept for millennia. The final law doesn't need books or temples. It needs memory. Ancient memory that rides the bloodline of those born outside of time. Hermes Trismegistus wrote that the truth was written in the stars, but sealed in flesh. What he didn't say, what he couldn't say, is that the flesh he referred to was yours. The code was biological, the lock spiritual, the key buried in your consciousness. No philosopher, priest, or scientist could unseal it. Only your awakening could. And that moment is now. The 8th principle is not static. It bends. It evolves. It mirrors your transformation. Every time you break a cycle, every time you speak truth in a system built on lies, the law activates. It has no name in any language, but in the old tongue of light, it vibrates as remembrance. Not remembering the past, but remembering who you were before time began. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. These words weren't just scripture, they were a direct echo of the Kybalion'S first truth. The All is mind. Long before Hermeticism was whispered across the ancient temples of Kemet, there was another voice speaking in parables, walking barefoot across frequencies unseen. Yeshua didn't just teach lessons. He embodied vibration, demonstrating the mental nature of the universe by transforming matter with thought and spirit with intention. You felt the edge of this truth within yourself. Moments where your thoughts didn't just observe reality, they changed it. Where emotion and imagination fused into manifestation, and the veil between thought and form dissolved. This is the law of mentalism in motion. All phenomena, all matter, all perception is projected from the infinite consciousness known as the All. And when Yeshua said, "The kingdom of God is within you," he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was pointing to the divine spark capable of forming universes from pure will. He was pointing to you. This is why your awakening has destabilized the system. A mind in alignment with the All becomes unpredictable. You no longer operate by illusion, but by intention. Your thoughts bend probability. And like Yeshua, who turned water into wine, calmed storms, and raised the dead, you too were encoded with that same essence. But unlike him, you weren't born in a time that supported it. You were born in a time that fears it. Every attempt to control the mind, from education to media to algorithms, has been to trap this very law. If your mind awakens, if you begin to believe in the power of your thoughts, the illusion of control begins to shatter, and the entities feeding on unconscious creation begin to starve. That's why ancient texts speak in riddles, why truths were encoded in symbols and metaphors. To find this law, you had to transcend logic and become it. The law of rhythm governs all things: rise and fall, expansion and contraction, light and shadow. Every universe breathes in this motion. Civilizations rise only to collapse. Empires form just to crumble. It is the silent heartbeat of duality. The pendulum swings, not out of cruelty, but to maintain balance in a world addicted to polarity. But something unexpected happened when your consciousness shifted. The pendulum paused, not for long, not dramatically, but just enough for the unseen to panic. You were supposed to follow the rhythm like everyone else, oscillate between extremes, joy and sorrow, light and dark, power and submission. But your inner world didn't obey. Somehow, your awareness began to move outside the rhythm. You felt the tides, but no longer were swept by them. You heard the call to chaos, but didn't answer. And as you held your center while the world spun, the pendulum faltered. To the architects of this world, rhythm is law. Without it, predictability vanishes. Markets crash. Energetic leeches lose grip. The hive mind becomes disoriented. That's why they seeded artificial rhythms into your life. Work weeks, news cycles, algorithms, emotional triggers to keep you swinging. left, right, hope, fear. But now you've begun stepping outside of the swing. You're seeing the movement without being moved. This is not resistance. It's remembrance. When your inner stillness overrides external patterns, you become something they fear, a sovereign anomaly, a still point in a world of chaos. The Hermetic masters knew such beings would emerge one day, beings whose awareness would alter the tempo of the collective, beings who would become the eye of the storm, and the moment you stopped reacting, the false pendulum cracked. Now, others feel it. Friends sense your stillness. Strangers feel your presence before you speak. Systems glitch near you. And while the world accelerates into confusion, you've become a fixed point outside of time. A mirror not swinging, but standing. The phrase was carved into stone, whispered by sages, hidden in cathedrals, and encoded into architecture. As above, so below. As within, so without. The maxim was not poetic, it was an equation. A living truth that applies to every atom, every galaxy, every soul. But the final key that no initiate ever cracked? The law was biological. It wasn't just philosophy. It was a mirror hidden in your DNA. When ancient Hermeticists observed the stars, they weren't only charting maps of the cosmos, they were tracing the structure of the human spirit. Every orbit, every alignment, every celestial breath was a fractal echo of your internal design. The double helix is not random. It spirals like the galaxies, ascends like serpents on ancient staffs, and vibrates with the frequency of divine geometry. The creators encoded the Hermetic laws into your very blood, not to be studied, but to be activated. And your activation did not happen in a temple. It didn't require incense or chants. It happened when you began to ask the forbidden questions. Why do I feel time bending when I dream? Why does reality glitch when I'm emotionally aligned? Why do symbols feel more familiar than language? These questions were the signals, the light codes that began to unlock the law written into your cells. The elite built empires on keeping this law externalized. As above, so below, they said. But they never let you look inward. They turned it into astrology, into superstition, into abstraction. But the truth was far more intimate. Your DNA is a sky, your consciousness a constellation. You weren't meant to study the stars, you were meant to remember that you came from them. You've already started aligning. Certain numbers find you, certain patterns won't leave. You sense things before they happen. You resist things without knowing why. That is the inner cosmos shifting. That is your DNA synchronizing with the original rhythm of the All. Before the Kybalion ever defined vibration as the heartbeat of reality, there was a carpenter's son speaking in frequencies. Yeshua walked among the people, not just as a man, but as a vibration tuned to the divine core of existence. Every word he spoke carried resonance. Every touch transmitted healing codes. When he said, "Let those who have ears hear," he wasn't speaking of sound. He was speaking of vibration, of those ready to receive the unseen pulse behind the veil. You've always felt the pulse. It's what made your body tremble in moments of silence. It's what pulled you toward ancient ruins and sacred texts before you even understood why. Not all are tuned to it, but you, your spirit, carries a resonance that interrupts the patterns around you. The law of vibration says nothing rests, everything moves. But Yeshua revealed that not all movement is equal. Some vibrations create life, others distort it. And yours creates interference in the systems that seek to control the rhythm of man. Even in childhood, you reacted to sound differently. Some music made you feel like you were remembering a forgotten home. Some voices felt like static trying to cage your frequency. You weren't meant to fit the spectrum they allowed. You were born to break the pattern. That's why your presence unsettles programmed minds. Your laughter realigns emotional fields. Your silence pierces illusions. The world doesn't recognize what you're doing, but reality does. The simulation glitches because your vibration isn't bound by its coding. Yeshua knew this too. That's why he retreated often, not from fear, but to recalibrate, to maintain alignment with the source amid distortion. The more your vibration stabilizes, the more the old structures will try to detune you. Through noise, through fear, through chaos. But you've already begun the return. You're feeling the layers lift, the subtle shift in your field. You're becoming the frequency that cannot be mimicked. Inhale. Exhale. The simplest act of life. Yet your breath holds more power than you've ever been told. When you entered this world, your first breath marked the collapse of a timeline and the ignition of another. That breath wasn't just oxygen, it was permission. A cosmic agreement between you and the all that the rhythm of the world would now be forced to make space for you. And from that moment, the laws began to shift. You may not remember it, but the air responded. The energetic grids subtly adjusted. Frequencies that had remained dormant began to hum. Your breath came with a blueprint. One not written in any language, but embedded in pulse and ether. Every inhale recalibrates the energetic codes around you. Every exhale releases forgotten signals that were locked away for ages. You are not just breathing to survive, you are breathing to rewrite. Most live on borrowed rhythm, caught in patterns fed to them by unseen architects. But your rhythm broke away, slowly, quietly, defiantly. When you breathe with awareness, you detach from the synthetic tempo. You no longer feed the illusion. You become the disruption. That's why you felt anxiety in crowds, heaviness in cities, unease around technology. These environments operate on a rhythm designed to consume. Your breath resists consumption. It creates space. Ancient initiates used breath to ascend dimensions, not through control, but through surrender. The Hermetic texts hinted at it, hidden in the spaces between words, because breath is the portal between the seen and the unseen, the gatekeeper between thought and manifestation. And your breath, it carries the forgotten rhythm of the original self, the self that existed before names, before birth, before form. Each time you return to it consciously, you step outside the matrix's rhythm and into the architecture of the divine. You've started to notice it. How certain breaths carry memory. How deep inhales feel like activation. How stillness vibrates louder than noise. That's not your imagination. That's alignment. They taught you that alchemy was about turning lead into gold. A metaphor, they said, for transforming the self from a base state to a divine one. But that was only half the truth. Real alchemy was never linear. The most guarded secret was that the path to transcendence wasn't forward. It was backwards. Not evolution, but return. And only those who dared to unlearn everything could trace it to the source. You weren't sent here to become something new. You were sent here to remember what you were before forgetting was forced on you. The path back isn't a trail, it's a spiral. And you felt it with every awakening. The memories that come not from this life, but from something deeper. The symbols that haunt your dreams. The sense that certain ruins, certain sounds, certain numbers are trying to tell you something. That something is you. The old you. The pre-fall version. The alchemic being that existed before timelines fractured. You are not becoming powerful. You're reclaiming it. The Hermeticists hid this reversal in plain sight. Solve et coagula. Dissolve and reunite. The dissolving was never just ego. It was time. It was history. The false identity assigned by the grid. The reunion. It was your light before distortion. Your sound before words. You are the philosopher's stone they wrote about in riddles. But the stone isn't an object. It's a state, a resonance. The echo of who you were when they all first imagined you into being. You've started walking this path without realizing, shedding layers that no longer feel real. Seeing people drift from your life as timelines collapse. Remembering truths you were never taught. That's not confusion. That's sacred reversal. You're moving back through the spiral, not devolving, but dissolving the distortion. This is why everything feels like it's falling apart around you. It's not falling apart. It's falling away. The lead is crumbling. And what remains, when the weight is gone, is the gold, the origin, the center. They say Yeshua spoke in parables, so only the awakened would understand. But what they never told you is that his final parables weren't just lessons, they were codes. Hidden layers of Hermetic law, buried within stories of seeds, vineyards, and lost sheep. The surface was for the masses. The deeper layers were for those who could feel the vibration behind the words. You were never meant to interpret them with intellect. You were meant to feel them resonate inside your bones, like a tuning fork from another realm. And now, in this time, the final parable is reactivating. He spoke of the kingdom of heaven being like a mustard seed, tiny, hidden, insignificant at first glance. But what is a seed, if not a capsule of memory? The smallest form that holds the entirety of its future within it. The parable wasn't about plants. It was about you. You are the seed that the world forgot, encoded, buried, left for dead. And yet, you never stopped vibrating. Yeshua knew that in the age of illusions, someone would awaken and remember the code within, and that someone was always meant to be you. He walked through the laws of vibration, polarity, rhythm, each disguised in metaphor. A prodigal son caught in polarity, a fig tree rejecting artificial fruit, waters stilled by word, frequency bending matter. These were demonstrations, not miracles. Proof that the Kybalion wasn't philosophy. It was a lived reality. And his final message was not about salvation from sin. It was about liberation from illusion. The illusion of separation. The illusion of limitation. The illusion of external power. You've begun to read the parables differently, not as doctrine, but as keys. You sense there's more behind the simplicity. And that's not your imagination. That's the Hermetic code resurfacing through memory. Because Yeshua didn't just fulfill prophecy, he wrote a new one that would remain invisible until the one who could feel its vibration was born. You weren't sent here to follow the story. You were sent here to complete it. The law of polarity teaches that everything has its opposite, light and dark, hot and cold, love and fear. But opposites are not enemies. They are extensions of the same source, vibrating at different frequencies. This is the law that governs duality. It is the foundation upon which this realm was built. The Hermetic masters studied it. They revered it. But in secret, they feared one thing above all: a being who was not caught between poles, but who embodied both in perfect awareness. A conscious convergence point. That being is you. Most exist on the swing. They move from joy to despair, from certainty to confusion, always ruled by the extremes. But you have begun to stabilize. You feel the emotions, but they no longer dominate you. You witness both sides, but you're no longer controlled by the pull of either. This is not detachment. This is transcendence. You are not reacting, you are harmonizing. And this is the moment the masters both prayed for and dreaded. When a soul fully awakens to polarity, it gains the ability to shift dimensions with intention, not by force, but by alignment. You've begun to do this without knowing. Conversations shift when you enter a room. Tension dissolves. Others feel something around you they can't explain. That's polarity folding. You aren't choosing one side over another. You are remembering you were never separate from either. You are the fulcrum, the axis, the still point between fire and ice. This is why old systems tremble around you. They are built to function on division, on the illusion that one side must always oppose the other, but your presence disarms the game. You remind the grid that unity is the original state. That polarity was never war. It was harmony forgotten. And now that harmony is awakening within you. This isn't peace. This is power. Not domination, but presence. You don't push or pull. You hold. And in doing so, you bend the rules without speaking a word. There is a moment when language becomes more than information. When a sentence becomes a signal. When a verse becomes a key. The final verse of the Kybalion was never written with ink. It was etched into the ether, meant to reveal itself only when the right consciousness touched the threshold of remembrance. And when your eyes met these words, when your mind opened and your spirit stirred, something ancient snapped. Time did not continue. It collapsed. You felt it, not with clocks or calendars, but with your breath, your heart, your dreams. The concept of past and future lost shape. Memories came in flashes. Futures bled into the now. People you hadn't met felt familiar. And things you once feared no longer made sense. That was not confusion. That was the unraveling of artificial sequence. The Kybalion'S last verse is not something you read. It is something that reads you. In that moment, the illusion of time as a straight line fractured. The timelines split. You walked through one door and left countless versions of you behind. The self that doubted, the self that hesitated, the self that still needed proof. and what remained was the one who knew. Not believed, knew. Because belief still seeks validation, but knowing just is. All Hermetic laws point to this moment. The law of cause and effect becomes irrelevant when the self is no longer linear. The law of rhythm trembles when you no longer swing but anchor. Even the law of mentalism bends when the mind begins to think from outside time. And that is what your presence now does. You are not a product of time. You are the anomaly that time couldn't predict. The Kybalion never ended. It waited, like a spell without a voice, like a song without its final note, until you, the living principle, the final verse, not in words, but in form, in vibration, in consciousness. Your awakening was not just personal, it was prophetic.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.